on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Captain America Brave New World. I really enjoyed this movie, but this movie is insanely frustrating and infuriating because there are so many elements of it that are incredible, and then there's a lot of elements that are incredibly underwhelming. So, that being said, let's dive into this review, shall we?
Modern Movie Review.
Okay, so to talk about some of my conflictions with this movie, I am going to have to dive into spoilers, but I'm going to go ahead and give you guys my spoiler-free thoughts and reaction first so that those of you guys who haven't seen the movie yet can see my general opinions on it, because overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I think that the action sequences in this film are relatively good. There are a couple that are not great, but for the most part, every aviation scene is really cool. I feel like they do a lot of fun stuff with the Falcon suit, and there's a lot of different dynamics, and something that I love in particularly about this movie is Sam Wilson's use of the Captain America shield is incredibly different from a lot of different sequences. Like, we've seen the Captain America shield now in probably about like 10 different Marvel projects, and he still finds a way to come up with cool and creative ways to use that shield, which I think is awesome. I think that Joaquin Torres giving us another Falcon in the sky is incredibly fun. They're able to do some stuff that's really interesting when they work together, which I really like. And there's a lot of great character dynamics together. Like, Joaquin Torres and Sam Wilson work incredibly well together. I think that they have a very fun dynamic that bounces off of each other well. I think that the sequences with Sam Wilson going face to face with Thaddeus Ross and having to have some heart-to-heart, really hard conversations are good in this movie, and I think that there's a lot of elements like that that works really well. I think that for the most part, the writing in this film is incredibly generic and bland. Like, I feel like there's not any particular lines of dialogue that stick out and are incredible. That being said, there's one specific scene I'm going to get into later, which I think is well written and does a really good job of showcasing what makes Sam Captain America so important. And like I said, I'll get into that later because that is a kind of spoilery scene, but overall, I think that the writing is just so bland and generic that it makes it a lot harder to enjoy this movie when you have a character like the leader, who's supposed to be one of the smartest people in the entire world, and he doesn't feel like a smart character, and you have a lot of like political intrigue, and like there's stuff going on where there's going to be a war coming, and we're not doing anything that's actually like making it seem like it's as serious as it should feel. Like, I feel like for the most part, this movie is setting up huge stakes of we're about to accidentally start World War III, but then it doesn't actually do anything to kind of build that tension. I think a good way to kind of compare this to another movie is in X-Men First Class, when they're doing the kind of like Cuban Missile Crisis type sequence at the end of that movie, it does genuinely feel like, oh my god, we're about to see the start of World War III. This is absolutely terrible. This is going to go absolutely miserable if the characters can't stop what's about to happen. But in this movie, we don't feel those stakes as much. Like, there's a good chance that the couple of battleships that are right there are potentially going to shoot down Sam Wilson and Joaquin Torres, but for the most part, it doesn't actually feel as high stakes as it should, and I think that that's one of the main reasons I have a problem with that sequence. Is it just reminds me a lot of X-Men First Class, which did that thing with there being potentially a world war starting, and they did it a lot better in X-Men First Class. But that being said, I do think that the action sequences are relatively interesting. I love the fact that they brought up Celestial Island and they're bringing back Tiamat, and we're kind of actually finally exploring what the hell is going on with that. I know a lot of people have been complaining about this movie because they're like, it feels like an Incredible Hulk 2, and they're touching on stuff from Eternals and Falcon and Winter Soldier, and they're talking about how those shows and movies aren't great, and that it's really weird that this movie is pulling from that. Okay, sorry for that awkward cut. My cat decided to get into a fight, so I had to break up a cat fight. But that being said, what I wanted to just touch on with that is I like the fact that Marvel is touching on some of their properties that aren't as popular and aren't as enjoyed, because it shows me that Marvel isn't being reactionary. They had a general idea of what they wanted to do when they made Eternals. When they made The Incredible Hulk, they liked what they had. They produced a movie that they enjoyed. Falcon and Winter Soldier, once again, this is one that kind of flopped a little bit. The ending of that show was incredibly disappointing, but they're not afraid of what they've put out. They're still wanting to move forward with the stories that they themselves are establishing, and I like that. I feel like they're doing something that DC in the last 10 years has had a big problem with, where DC, they were making the Suicide Squad movie, and then Guardians of the Galaxy came out, and they're like, oh my god, a team of criminals who go to prison, and then they end up breaking out of prison, and they end up having a whole lot of fun saving the galaxy and listening to good music. Why don't we turn our, Suicide Squad movie that's supposed to be really serious and dark, and let's just make it comedic like that. We're going to just turn this into like Guardians of the Galaxy. And instead of Marvel realizing, oh man, we're having a problem with this movie, let's maybe make it something like Deadpool and Wolverine or No Way Home that's doing really good in multiversal, instead of being reactionary and changing Captain America, they stayed with what makes Captain America Captain America. They did a good job of introducing political themes that they've established in the MCU and moving them forward. And I think that for the most part, this movie is really good. I think that it has a lot of elements that makes it great, but like the TV show Falcon Winter Soldier, this movie has a lot of really high highs and a lot of really low lows. So with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and issue the spoiler warning now. We're going to get further into my big problems with this movie. Let's dive into it. Okay, so right off the bat, I do want to go ahead and say something that I think Marvel has done really well post-Endgame is introduce characters that we really like. I think that regardless of how you feel about shows like She-Hulk and Miss Marvel and Moon Knight, those characters are all really interesting, and by the end of the project, you're like, wow, I want to see this character more, and I feel like this movie does an incredible job doing that same thing. I love Sam Wilson as Captain America. I think that they did an incredible job fleshing him out in The Falcon and Winter Soldier, and they just kind of continue with that here. I think that this is an incredible acting performance by Anthony Mackie. I think that he does a really good job being this leading man, and by the end of the movie, you really feel why he is Captain America. I like the fact that we're bringing back elements of his character from Captain America Winter Soldier. He works with veteran affairs. He is somebody who's like a therapist, and I think that that is what makes Sam Wilson as Captain America so incredible, is he's somebody who is there for people. He's somebody who helps bring out the best in people, and I think that you need a Captain America who can do stuff like that. I like the fact that in this movie there's a lot of sequences with him trying to counsel President Ross. President Ross is somebody who's very hot-headed and somebody who's getting a very, bad rap because he's been very temperamental in the past. And you have characters like Sam Wilson who, instead of just disagreeing with the president, because he does, he's talking through the issues with him. He's having these discussions. He's trying to reason with the guy, and I think that that's what makes him so special. He's somebody who talks first, shoots later, and I think that that is first and foremost an incredible character aspect, and I think that they do an incredible job of pinpointing what makes Sam Wilson as Captain America such a crucial part of the comics and such a crucial part of the MCU going forward. I liked that. I thought that that was great. Another thing, the second lead of this movie, undoubtedly, Harrison Ford as President Ross, absolutely incredible. I think that his acting performance, once again, phenomenal. Harrison Ford is so good in roles like this, and he absolutely is captivating on screen. And I really like the fact that they brought him this sentimental side that we've never really seen before. Thaddeus Ross has always been a very, powerful war general. He just is very military, very manly, very macho all the time. He's the kind of person where, they'll kind of make fun of in some of the Avengers movies, where it's just okay, well, he is... Oh man, I'm trying to think of the exact quote that they use. I think it's in the first Iron Man movie where Tony and Obadiah Stane are having a conversation and they're talking about how to win wars, and then Obadiah Stane is like, you need to be the guy with the bigger stick. And I think that when they make a reference to something like that, I like to think of Thaddeus Ross. I think that he's the guy who's like, we just need a bigger stick. We need to be the stronger person. And he's somebody who's very much like, I don't mind going to war because we're going to win that goddamn war. But I like the fact that they're bringing out a side of him that cares about his daughter. And it's like, I've been so ruthless these last 20 years. I really want to go back to being that sweet father that I was. You can see, I think that they show in this movie, there's a gravestone where he's visiting his past wife. And he's very emotional. And I think that you could see that when his wife passed away, he lost a big part of himself. And he's trying to get back to that sense of humanity. And the acting performance with this is really well done. I think the fact that he's trying to prove himself as being a changed man is a very interesting story. I really like that. And I think that him being in one of the most prominent political positions and being the face of the American government is putting a lot of stress on him. And it's making it really hard for him to show that he is a better person, and it's putting him in a very stressful environment, and he has those pills that are gamma pills that are making him kind of Hulk out. I love the way that they deal with him in that internal struggle in this movie. I think that it works incredibly well. That being said, the twist of him becoming the Red Hulk at the end of the movie would have been cool if that was a twist. I understand that as a comic book fan, I don't think there's any version of this movie where they market it, and I don't know that the end of this movie is going to be him turning into the Red Hulk. But that being said, for people who aren't comic book fans, if they watched this movie through without having any clue that Red Hulk was going to be in this movie, it would have been insanely, insanely cool. And I also think that if we hadn't seen that he becomes Red Hulk on the podium, that would have made that scene 10 times more impactful in the movie theater. I think that a lot of people who are really negatively attacking this movie are doing it because their expectations were a little bit higher. We're seeing in the trailers that he hulks out at the podium and at the White House, and he goes through a rampage in Washington, D.C. and destroys a bunch of stuff. And I think a lot of people were expecting that to be something that happens earlier in the movie. Like me personally, I was expecting that to be like 2/3 of the way through the movie so we can see the repercussions of that. And instead they do it so late in the movie that we don't really get to explore what happens next. We just see that he takes responsibility for his actions, which, by the way, unrealistic as hell. A US president taking responsibility for the crimes that he's done and actually being put behind bars? This Marvel movie is unrealistic. But that being said, I enjoyed that he at least, took responsibility for his actions. He stepped out of office, which is such a noble thing to do, which is something that, like, no president has ever in American history stepped down like that. I think that Nixon technically quit because he was getting impeached and he wanted to quit first, but that's awesome. That actually is a great character development for him. That's a good story arc for him. And so overall, it's like you have a movie where the main character, Captain America, has an incredible character arc, has an incredible character story, and then you have the secondary character, Thaddeus Ross, who's the antagonist of the movie technically, and they clash together. They have a lot of great interactions. Their dialogue when they're speaking together is the best dialogue in the entire film, and he also has an incredible character arc. You're like, you have those two elements. How could this film possibly not be good? And you get the issue with Marvel having to have their Marvelisms and having way too many characters. So, overall, side characters that I do think should have been in this movie and actually worked well in this movie. Carl Lumley, I think that his entire character story arc in this movie is incredible. I think that they don't do a great job catching up to people who haven't seen The Falcon and Winter Soldier, and that's one of those things where it's like, I really love this character, but I think that it's only because I have the context of The Falcon and Winter Soldier. I feel like casual fans going and watching this movie, they're not really going to get the whole fact that this guy was imprisoned and tested on for 30 years, and he's somebody who's been treated like shit by the American government. So when you get that scene where, in the movie, he pulls a gun on Thaddeus Ross or whatever, he tries to assassinate the president, there's a lot of versions of this where, like, if you haven't seen The Falcon and Winter Soldier, it doesn't make sense why he would do that. But, like, it actually is kind of a big deal that, like, yeah, this guy's been fucked over by the American government, would try to kill the US president. Like, that actually makes a lot of sense. And so that's subplot works relatively well. But like I said, it's one thing where it's like you need the context of The Falcon and Winter Soldier, and that might not potentially work for everybody. Joaquin Torres. That's how you introduce a character. I love it. I thought that he was very good in his minor parts in The Falcon and Winter Soldier, and then they throw him straight into this movie, and he is so fun. He's like a great surrogate character, and I think if you were to compare him to characters like America Chavez in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, or you were to compare him to like Miss Marvel in The Marvels, I think that he is the best example of them bringing a new character into the world of being a superhero, and them actually being entertaining, being somebody who wants to do this, has the passion for it, has the drive for it. His scene where he's talking to Sam Wilson about how when he was younger and he wanted to be a superhero, he felt like the superheroes were so far away, and then he had a chance to meet Sam, and now he's so close to becoming a superhero, and that's all he's ever wanted. It is so good. It is so emotional. They have scenes in this movie that are incredible with that character, so I liked him. I think that he's great. Sabra, one of the most controversial parts of this entire movie, feels like it could have been cut out, which is incredibly annoying. Like, obviously, a lot of people are boycotting this movie because of this character, and for them to literally feel like they didn't need to be in the movie, not great. But that being said, it does kind of help with the fact that Thunderbolt Ross goes to Japan in this movie, and there's a big portion of this film where he's in Japan, but they need him to be doing stuff at, like, in America. So instead, they send Ruth to do the stuff that he would be doing if he was still in America. So I understand why she needed to be there, but, like, at the same time, it feels like that could have been any given character, and it being her did not necessarily work for me. And overall, I feel like there's not really a lot more characters than that. I think that those are the main ones. And then you get Giancarlo Esposito's character, who, in the beginning of this movie, feels so plugged in. And then they add a sequence, which in my opinion is like the best action sequence in the entire movie, where he just randomly comes up on Captain America in the middle of a random street, starts gunning him down, and then Captain America has to fight without his suit, his shield, anything like that. And that action sequence is absolutely incredible, and it works so well. But other than that, every single scene that Giancarlo Esposito is in feels like it was plugged into this movie, and it's not great. Another thing, the leader, I like Tim Blake Nelson. I think that his acting performance in this is all right. The design is not great. The motives, not great. He's supposed to be a genius, and he's over here talking about, oh, I have all these probabilities, and if I do this thing, then that thing's gonna happen, and then there's gonna be a domino effect, and we're gonna have World War III, and it's all gonna be Ross's fault, and everyone's gonna hate President Ross, and I'm gonna ruin his legacy, and all of these things, and it's just like, he seems like he should be a genius, but also, he should have had a much better plan than that. He should have had a much cooler plan, and the fact that, him turning Thaddeus Ross into the Red Hulk was his, secondary plan, not great. But one of the main things that kills me about the leader's inclusion in this movie is, one, it feels incredibly unnecessary. I like the fact that they're tying up loose ends, but he did not need to be here at all. And for two, it's one of those things where it's like, he's setting up all these things that's been going on in the background of the MCU, and I would have rather found out that, he pushed for the Sokovia Accords or something, or he pushed for something that happened in the past. Instead, he's just coming out and doing something right now that's affecting things right now. And it doesn't add a whole lot to the movie. It doesn't add a lot of, emotional nuance. It doesn't add anything, interesting. It doesn't give a different perspective that Sam's going to have to, try to, think things through and kind of understand, oh my god, this is another person like Isaiah Bradley who's been fucked over by the American government. Not really. And then my big thing with him, his whole superpower is that he's a genius and he sees these probabilities, and there are 3 things he predicts in this movie that are just wrong. Red Hulk hulking out on the submarine. He really wanted that to happen. It did not happen. I said submarine. It's not a submarine. What is it? The helicarrier in the middle of the ocean. He's trying to get President Ross to hulk out. He doesn't do it, so he fails there. He thought that if he shot up the prison that Isaiah Bradley was being held in, that Sam Wilson would no longer go to track him down. He's wrong about that. And then there's a third thing, I think, in the movie that he's wrong about. But there's just, so many things that he's incorrect about. And when your whole character arc and your whole character, point of it even being in this film is that you're a genius, that doesn't work for me. That's not great. It's really icky. And it's really disappointing because it's I was excited to see this character return, and they did that with it. It's okay. And then the post-credit scene is another part where it's I enjoyed this post-credit scene more than the average person. A lot of people are, kind of hating on it. But I do think, this character who has the biggest brain in the world would know that there's multiversal stuff going on and that there's probably going to be incursions soon. So him predicting that is relatively cool. And I like the fact that they're what are you going to do when you have to fight against all these other heroes to protect your Earth? That is interesting, because that's what Secret Wars is, and that's what the incursions and stuff is, different heroes having to defend their specific Earths against the other heroes who are just trying to protect their Earth. And I think that setting Sam up to be the leader of an Avengers team like that is cool. I do kind of wish we got to see more of the Avengers. We did get to see Winter Soldier, though, and I do think that scene with Bucky and Sam is, in my opinion, the best written scene in the entire movie. I think that their bromance shines through incredibly well. The sequence with Bucky being you were definitely the right choice to be Captain America, and it's good that you do not have the serum, because, and in his words, he says, Steve was somebody for people to look up to. You're somebody that people can aspire to be. That is so well said! Yes! Thank you, Marvel. That was incredible. That was a really great sequence, and I just loved overall the fact that they brought him in. It didn't feel like some huge, glorious, oh my god, it's a cameo. It was a very heartfelt scene from a friend just going to spend some time with a friend. That was perfect. I loved that. But yeah, overall, all those different elements, though, are why, for the most part, I enjoyed this movie. There are some action sequences that are lackluster. I will give it that. There are a lot of sequences that are really slow. I will give it that. There's a lot of things that bother me with the fact that, Isaiah Bradley's grandson is just never mentioned in this movie a single time, and I understand he's one of the characters who got written out of this movie, but also, he's just all of a sudden Isaiah Bradley is I am nobody. That was weird. That was really weird. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I had a good time with it. I think that there are definitely elements of it that worked better than other things. I think that the humor, for the most part, works well for me. There are a few moments that are definitely very Marvel-y, that I will say one of my least favorite jokes in the entire movie was in the trailer, and it was one that literally made me roll my eyes and say, oh, it's going to be one of these movies. But the scene where he hulks out and one of the reporters is just since when are they red? I was somebody just hulked out in front of you, and you know that they fucking destroy everything, and instead of running or freaking out, you're going to quickly make a quip? Is that girl secretly a fucking super soldier or something? Why is she not freaking out right now? Somebody just hulked out 50 feet in front of her. She should be freaking out, not quickly quipping oh, he's red. No! Anyways, But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this movie. I think that it's better than a lot of other movies that Marvel has been putting out the last couple of years. My biggest hot take, I enjoyed this movie more than Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that Deadpool and Wolverine, if you rewatch it, not as incredible as a lot of people give it credit for. I think that a lot of the action sequences in Deadpool and Wolverine are not great. And in this one, at least I think every action sequence worked relatively well. The fight sequence with Red Hulk at the end of the movie was phenomenal. So overall, I'm gonna give this movie a solid 81 out of 100. I don't think it's one of the best movies that Marvel's ever made, but I definitely think it is getting way overhated online right now. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching, and if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Bow. Bow.